Today's webinar is interactive. Ask us questions at any time using the Messages panel. To respond to a live poll during the webcast, click here. Your feedback is valuable to us. To enable captions, hover over the CC button. Having technical difficulties? Simply refresh your browser, choose the Help button, or message us. When we're done, please complete our short survey. Your feedback is important to us.
Welcome everyone to our financial benefits and use cases of AVS presentation. Quick introduction. My name is Tom Johnston. I'm one of our principal architects at Insight. I've been working here for over 20 years. I work in our portfolio team, identifying and designing new offerings that our sales team sells, and then we deliver. Pat?
Yes, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pat Teal. I am a principal solution architect. I have a VCP. I came from VMware, but I've worked for many years with enterprise and global customers, helping them migrate from on-premise to cloud migrations and modernize their applications as well. Back to you, Thomas.
All right. Before we start and dive in, I want to cover one thing. This is an extension to a webinar we previously had and called Accelerate and Expand Your Cloud Journey with AVS. And here's the link for that. And it's a couple of things that high-level items that we covered. And a little bit of this will be a repeat, but most of it will be new content. And so if you want to see what our offerings are around AVS, I highly recommend going to this link and you can take a look at what we previously recorded. All right, today's agenda is we'll cover, again, a few of those fast items that we covered before, why AVS and some best use cases around AVS. We'll even give you a customer example. And then we're going to dive in, and the majority of it is this webinar is going to be around the financial benefits of AVS, how to operationalize AVS, how to manage it. And then we'll cover some quick details around why Insight for AVS, how to engage us, and some questions and answers.
Fantastic. And I'm going to lead off by talking a little bit about why AVS and some of the best use cases that we see with our customers. We talk to a lot of customers that are looking to move to the cloud. And one of the reasons that they do that could be a variety of different things, whether they're doing merger and acquisitions, whether they're doing maybe they're time for a data center refresh and they're looking for another way to reduce CapEx expenses, or they're looking to rapidly move to the cloud. A lot of our customers don't realize how easy it is to use AVS, to be able to migrate their existing VMware environment up to the cloud using their existing applications. And then there's other customers that want to start looking at doing native Azure. And what's great about having AVS, it's a platform. We call it M&M, Migrate and Modernize. You can actually take some of the modern services that are in Azure and be able to seamlessly put them into the AVS environment itself, along with some other ideas as well. Probably the biggest one that a lot of customers are really talking about today is the extended support. If you currently have 2008 or 2012, you're probably paying an extended service agreement. When you go to AVS, that is included in the AVS environment. So no longer do you have to pay those extended service agreements. That's a tremendous savings for a lot of our customers themselves, along with things like disaster recovery as well. And one of the reasons and benefits of going to AVS is really to leverage your existing VMware investments. That means not only just the investments, but the skills that you have, the team that you've been building on that have built their careers around running VMware is exactly the same when you go to AVS. You have the speed and the scale with some of the best managed and some of the fastest moving hardware for your environment. And it's very cost effective to run server and SQL inside AVS as well. And that modernization, we talked a little bit on the previous slide about M&M, is be able to utilize the Azure services and be able to use the economy of time to be able to modernize your applications as necessary. You don't have to do it in one large swoop. You can modernize your applications after you've moved it into AVS. And it's the fastest path. When you're moving your data center or extending your SDDC into the cloud, you can move quickly and easily without changing IPs and be able to make your transition to the cloud very seamless using AVS as well. So we've got lots of examples. We've been working with a lot of customers, whether they're in retail and whether it's transportation. But here's an example of one of our large customers that we actually helped migrate a very large environment. They were going out of the data center business. They wanted to migrate to the cloud. They chose AVS. And this migration was absolutely seamless. We took them from their existing data center, be able to move everything easily up without changing IP addresses. They moved it into AVS. From there, they've actually expanded their footprint in AVS as well. So it's an absolutely amazing story where they took what was going to be a small migration and has been slowly growing it over time. They're now almost fully inside of AVS. They're using that platform to help modernize their applications as they feel fit and moving it into Azure native. The impact was that it reduced their costs from CapEx to OpEx. It gave them a seamless approach to be able to go to the cloud, and the customer is extremely satisfied with that opportunity. And VMware services were highly engaged. We were there for a 12-month engagement, helping them not only do that migration, but do the analyzing up in front, determine which applications and how they should be migrated to actually do the migration, and now working with them on the modernization front as well. So Insight brings all of those services together in one bundled service to help you and your business be able to migrate to the cloud seamlessly.
All right, I'll take this, Pat. So we're going to cover the financial benefits of AVS here, and I'll speak to most of this. And we're going to recover a couple things that we highlighted on already, but expand into that a little bit. For instance, Pat mentioned it's the fastest path to cloud to go to AVS. And mentioning, for instance, you don't have to re-architect, re-IP, you can use the same MAC addresses, those types of things. Well, there's a lot more to that than just not re-IPing. But for instance, your VMs don't need to be resized, for instance, right? Whatever you assign to those VMs, those resources in your existing VMware environment, those get migrated that way. And I'll go a little bit more into that a little bit later. But point is you're not increasing or changing the resources that you have allocated to those VMs. They get migrated as part of that migration. You can also, as part of those migrations, do some HCX type of failback if you need to, reverse migrations, simple rollback plans if you need to. So there's always that option of, okay, well, it didn't work the way you expected it for a specific workload. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But if that, the thing is, it's kind of like a plan of action to be able to get back easier, where you may not be able to do that as easy with other solutions. And of course, you get a lot of other VMware benefits like HA and resource management, and you can obviously continue to use your existing VMware skills that you have today. Your folks know VMware today, and you have operational processes probably around that you're leveraging. Not to mention snapshots and cloning and keeping the same templates and deployment process for your virtual machines. Those can continue to stay the same. And those are important, even, that's maybe not what you're paying to Microsoft, but those are financial aspects and benefits that you want to think about as part of going to AVS as well. All right. There's also, additional security that you get. You already know what that means in a VMware environment. So you get that today, no different if you move to AVS than you do today. Integration with other cloud services, though, you'll be able to leverage some of the other Azure solutions like Microsoft Defender and other things that can be brought to the table once it's in AVS. Less expensive migration effort. If you modernize, it's going to take a lot longer to modernize versus just migrating. And that's why Pat was saying that M&M type of migrate first, modernize later is a better approach for many customers. And it's more it's faster, and then you can then focus on those modernizations that you want to do later. And as I mentioned, the VMs are migrated with their exact same resource sizing. Again, I'll get into that a little bit later. But then Pat mentioned that end of support. If you're moving to AVS, you might be able to get the benefit of, for instance, not having to pay security patching for Windows or SQL. That now you'll get free security patching because you moved as part of AVS. All right, so I'm going to dive into an example of a customer where moving to AVS was actually financially beneficial to them, where we went through and I'll show you the process of what we do to go through from a high level to ascertain what that cost could look like and whether it is beneficial. It's not always beneficial, but there are many times when you start to consider all these aspects that it definitely could be very beneficial to move to AVS. One thing to take, as I mentioned earlier, the resource upsizing, right? When you move to IaaS, let's say any one of the cloud partners IaaS solutions, what always happens is during that migration, if you assigned a specific, in your VMware environment, a specific set of resources allocation, when you go to that IaaS as part of migration, what ends up happening is it always finds that next largest size t-shirted VM or IaaS VM to move into it, and it automatically upscales that. Now, that may not sound like a big thing when you're only looking at an individual VM itself, but when you're looking at the larger scope of how many VMs you might have, that could actually increase your price significantly because it's always jumping up to the next size of VM. The one thing you want to keep in mind is, in addition to that, is the storage may not always grow at the expected rate as well. What I mean by that is you may want to accommodate or increase more storage as part of your migration for future needs, right? And you can do that as part of going to AVS. All right, so in this particular customer's case, I'm giving you some insight into what their environment looked like. Starting out before they went to AVS, they had a total of 44 servers across 4 clusters. They had multiple different hardware vendor products you can see here, and one data center, but they had a total of 913 VMs. And what you want to do is you want to try and capture some of the resource information around across those 913 VMs. Total number of cores, memory, storage capacity, those types of details, and IOPS, of course, as well. And so what you're trying to do is come up with and figure out an average across those environments. By the way, you'll always have some larger outliers of bigger machines, and you kind of see some additional details here about diving in a little about some of those machines as well. For instance, some of them, 80 of them are almost powered off. So you might take a look at and say, well, okay, do we really need all 80 of those? Maybe we can get rid of some of them. You can see the different t-shirt sizes here. There were 26 unique, what I mean by unique VMs that didn't follow that t-shirt sizing that we saw that you might be doing on your existing VMware environment. And then those unique VMs might be wildly large. But we're still trying to come out with an average. And you see that on the top right-hand side, what those aspects are, the averages. And then what we use and do with that average is we come up with an average here you see across the top of this screen here, right? So still 913 VMs, but we find out the resource usage of each of these and the main OS type. And we're going to use those numbers to kind of figure out what you should be able to expect for your pricing of AVS. Now, there are a couple things before we get into that you might want to consider as well. How are you going to pay for your Windows OS licenses could be very specific, very important. So, for instance, you might want to really look at the licensing and the Azure hybrid benefit. That's what it's actually called. There's actually a link down here in the bottom right. But it depends upon how you bring your licenses or how you're going to license Windows. It might make a huge difference on how your price, what your price is. You can see here, without the Windows OS licenses, it's like $266,000, and with where you're bringing the Azure hybrid benefit to bear, where you're going to have no licensing purchase, it's going to be down to about $120,000. Both are on a 1-year commitment, so you got side by side. That additional cost is purely for Windows licensing, so something definitely to consider as well. All right, so here's where we're going to take those average numbers and plug them into a calculator. By the way, we do a lot of discovery behind the scenes here to figure out what that average is. We use some publicly available tools alongside of our own IP that we cross-reference, so we come up with the same number, making sure that this tool got the same number that this tool set did in a verification format. And so when we come up with these averages, that's how we come to those averages. And so you'll see here that the both of those tool sets or multiple tool sets came up with an estimation of needing 27 AVS 36 hosts. Azure VMware Solution hosts, 27 of them are needed. You can see some specifics of what we put in here for duplication and slack space. You may want to kind of take a look at what your needs are, because keep in mind, you might need to fit into some SLAs and stuff. So some of those numbers might adjust depending upon what your needs are. And by the way, one of the calculators, we put a link in here for you if you want to actually run through this process on your own. So 27 hosts is what we estimated for this customer. And then the next aspect is, okay, now that we know that we need 27 hosts or nodes, how are we going to, what kind of a pricing are we looking at from a reserve pricing? What I mean is subscription. So on the right-hand side, you see that there's a 3-year reserved instance. And then there's, compared that on the left-hand side, there's a 1-year reserved instance. You can obviously see by yourself that the 3 year is a much better deal. But the customer might decide, well, they don't want to commit to more, and let's stick with the 1-year reserve, because we're going to use that to continue through our process here. So roughly around $120,000 a month, right, is the price. All right. So let's compare that and summarize what we've learned now. Obviously, a 3-year reserve would be less. In this particular case, the customer wanted to stay with a 1 year and price it that way for consistency. We wouldn't be resizing any of the VM workloads, so those calculations are figured in here. By the way, we did increase the storage as part of this calculation to 300 gigs per VM to accommodate for some additional sizing, growth, that type of thing. So our price for AVS is roughly around $120,000 a month for 27 AV36 hosts to cover those 913 VMs. Standard. We want a standard disk. You could get faster premium disks. The price would go up certainly a little bit. Let's compare that to other solutions that might be out there in the market. You'll see that in the middle of the screen here in gray. Other public cloud providers, their solutions, including other VMware cloud platforms, range anywhere from 177K to 415K or 151K per month. So, potentially significantly larger price. And let's compare that to Azure IaaS on its own. It's relatively the same, area. At least it's in the, 180,000, but it could grow to 341,000 a month, depending upon the Azure hybrid benefit and those Microsoft licensing and how you dealt with that. So there are some additional, obviously AVS is cheaper in many cases, and it's not always, but it is many cases, especially even compared to, regular hybrid, Azure native cloud, I should say. And you can then migrate once, and then modernize those solutions to get that additional benefit, because just moving them to IaaS isn't modernizing them. And you're not actually saving that additional cost, because it's actually going to cost you more. We've shown that here. Take this example and run through the numbers if you want. And we're providing the data here to show you some visibility into what our estimations are. But certainly run through those costs on your own. It is the fastest way to get to cloud. So, hey, it's not only cheaper, it's fast. And you can roll back as needed if you need to as well. And no matter what, or where you're at in your path to get to AVS or cloud, we can help you, whether that's moving to Azure native, AVS. The Insight team's here to help you with that. All right, let me cover some AVS operations aspects as well. We're going to focus mostly on Azure Arc. Pat, you want to talk to this?
Yes. One of the areas that we talked about earlier about using the skill set that your team has running VMware. And a lot of experts are in your organization, more than likely, that really know how to use VMware tools. And one of the great things about going to AVS is that a lot of those day-to-day activities, the patching, the upgrades, the day-to-day activities that your team unfortunately has to do are eliminated, because all of that is assumed by Microsoft. There are still a lot of configurations. You still maintain your configurations. If you look at this chart, everything that's in blue is managed by Microsoft. Everything that's in gray is an area that you manage. So you still maintain your settings for NSX security. You still maintain the sizing of the VMs. You still maintain a lot of the day-to-day activities. But what it does, it frees up your team to be able to focus more on business activities that generate revenue inside your environment. You can even include third-party applications, and support is still there from VMware if you need it. If there's something that's going on with the VMs that you need additional help, is that the support is not only provided by Microsoft, but also you can have support. Your support is still included inside of VMware as well for the VMware environment. So you get the best of both worlds, and you kind of move from a OpEx expense from a CapEx expense to an OpEx expense, which really helps plan and be able to modernize your costing, and your accounting people really appreciate that because it's very easy to predict what the monthly cost is as well. Hopefully that answered a lot of questions about the skills. Your skills are extremely important moving forward instead of having to learn all new tools.
Thanks, Pat. I'll take the next slide here. So obviously, Pat just covered how it's a shared responsibility. A lot of it is owned by Microsoft. And it was important to kind of cover that first slide around, okay, well, it is a shared. And so when it comes to managing your side, though, how do you operationally manage all those AVS VMs and AVS environment itself? And there's a number of ways. By the way, these same things I'm going to cover, you can also do on-prem with your VMware environment today. So if you incorporate Azure Arc into your AVS environment, what you do is you make your AVS VMs, that's called Arc-enabled servers. And so basically once you've Arc-enabled your servers, where you're bringing in Arc, it allows you to do some things that you would normally do outside of any VMware environment or as part of any normal environment. Like, for instance, organize the environment, govern it, secure it. And I'll get a little bit more what those details look like. But some of the other things that you can do are bring Arc. Once you have Arc-enabled servers, you can bring Arc services into that AVS environment. And this is an interesting aspect to take a look at, because there are some, and what I mean by bringing Arc services, they're actually Azure services that you're bringing to the table into the AVS environment as part of Arc. So, for instance, once you have AVS VMs running up there in Azure, you can actually, those VMs can actually consume Azure services. You can configure it so that they can consume the services that are already there in Azure. For instance, you could have the VMware VMs running through and joining and leveraging Azure SQL that's already in the native Azure environment. And they would do that seamlessly. The thing is, but what if you want a little bit less latency, and you want to bring in that SQL environment a little closer to your VM? And there's actually a way to do that with Azure Arc. So Arc actually has SQL built as part of it. It sits in a container, and it will actually run in the same network, same environment within the AVS environment itself. Instead of jumping out and into the Azure native network, it will exist in the same AVS network, and then SQL will be running straight right there, provided by by Arc. There are other services that Arc will also be able to do something similar with, and I'll list some of those in the next slide or two. But the point is that you can bring these services right into the AVS environment itself, and you can consume them right alongside your VMs. All right, and then of course you can run, as I mentioned, you can run Azure services with Arc pretty much anywhere. What I mean by that is Arc isn't just for AVS. You can bring that Arc down and Arc enable to your on-prem VMware environment, or even in other public cloud providers, VMware Solution environments, and more. And you can actually bring those services into those environments, as well as that compliance and governance and visibility and other aspects that Arc brings to the table. You can do that alongside of in those environments as well. So we're just talking about it with regards to AVS, but Arc is much larger than that. including consider things like, for instance, once you have Arc enabled those servers in AVS and other environments, then you can bring in other solutions like Azure Sentinel to help push policies and do patch management and many other things that you can bring into those environments as well through Arc. Right. So here's a cost pricing comparison. You actually get to see some of those details I was just talking about around what those other Arc enabled services are. So for instance, I mentioned SQL, but Postgres is also one. You can do app services, functions, logic apps, event grid, etc. You can bring those into those environments, excuse me, through Arc itself. Now, to get into Arc, there's no cost. You can bring and get into Arc initially, getting those Arc enabled servers, and do tagging, manage groups, event logs, templatized, RBAC, a whole bunch of things that come part of just signing up and Arc enabling those servers themselves. But then you can consume those additional services that are down in the bottom left hand corner there. And then once those services are all Arc enabled, of course that's for a cost. Then you can then bring on those additional Azure services I was talking about, like Sentinel, Defender, Azure Policy. All those types of things can then be brought in and then manage that environment. And that's how you can operationalize that AVS environment, as well as many other platforms that you have. Pat, you want to take it?
Yeah, so let's talk about why Insight for AVS. It's one of the biggest challenges that we want to always show and bring to the table is that Insight has a wide range of services available to help you make your journey to AVS even easier. As we take a look, Insight has really built a really solid platform of services, whether it be consulting, whether it be hardware lifecycle, or whether it be even managed services. We kind of define our scope of work between 6 different pillars. But modern infrastructure is where we usually falls for anything with AVS. But we can help you with whether it be your desktops, VDI, whether it be modernizing your applications, whether you're working on some of the newest technology, things like VR goggles and other items or data AI to be able to help with data lake and other large pools of data to be able to drive your business to the next generation. And probably the most often overlooked is cybersecurity. We have an entire team that's dedicated to help you make sure that you maintain and secure your environments themselves, especially with today's bad actors out there with ransomware and other activities. We want to make sure that we are there no matter what level of need you need. Our expertise is deep in every one of these categories. And we really want to make sure that you know that we listen to our customers. We want to make sure that you're successful. And we want to make sure that you're part of all the discovery and the actions planned for you. So we work jointly with you to help make sure that the applications and the services that we provide meet your needs and help drive bottom line revenue for you as well. And with that, we have a lot of services and a lot of team available. We have over 11,000 workforce to be able to help talk to you. We have about 8,000 delivery people. This is a very strong company, $8.3 billion a year. We formed in 1988. We operate globally in 19 countries. And we have just such a deep portfolio of relationships with not only VMware, but other vendors themselves, whether it be security, storage, or whatever you need, is that Insight brings all those services to the table. And we don't necessarily put you into one. We want to listen to what is best for your company and help make sure that we make the right choices jointly with you by having this depth of knowledge with our environment itself. So when you go to Insights, you know you're always going to get dependability. You're going to get people that'll help listen to you and help drive success for your business themselves.
Hey, Pat, I will add one more thing before I turn it back over to you. Last year, in 2022, Insight was one of Microsoft's largest global partners, meaning we delivered more AVS than almost anybody else on the planet. So, I mean, that's a reason in itself just to engage with us.
That's an absolutely great point. You know, we're very proud of that, that we are leading the charge with AVS. And with that, you know that we have the skills around delivering it. We've got an entire team built to it. But next part is we just want to talk about how to engage us. There's information. You can reach out to your account executive, or you can use this email that's listed on this slide, and it'll send it to our team, and we'll be glad to sit down with you, talk to you about AVS or your entire cloud migration, whether it be Azure native or wherever you want to take your business. We want to be there to help drive your success for you. So with this in mind, we're going to move now to the Q&A section, and we look forward to listening to some of your questions, and we'll help answer as many of those as possible.
Absolutely, Pat. And we'll take those in a second here. And I just want to thank everybody for watching the webinar and joining us here. I want to point out one thing. As I mentioned earlier, we do have that previously recorded session around AVS that you might want to take a look at, and it'll cover some additional details around what we deliver around AVS, how we delivered our methodology, those types of things, as well as taking a look at the next session that we have queued up, which is around accelerate your journey to the cloud with Azure VMware Solution. And our Canadian team will actually be delivering that in a couple of days on 4/4. And they will also have, from what I'm told, a French-speaking component there. So if you have any questions and you need to actually engage, leveraging the French language, you absolutely can help you support you there. And then, of course, learn more about Azure. Use the QR code and find out a little bit more about AVS. We're here to help, and we thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webcast, Financial Benefits of Use Cases for AVS, brought to you by Insight, Microsoft, and VMware. We will now get started with the live Q&A portion of our webcast. This part of the session is designed to be interactive between you and our presenters, Tom and Pat. If you have any questions, you may enter them in the chat. My name is Rocio Safe, and I'll be moderating the discussion. Let's kick this off with our first question. Pat, does AVS provide a complete VMware infrastructure?
Yeah, great. I'll be glad to answer that. When you actually sign up for AVS, it's something that's all inclusive. So you get the VMware licensing. You not only get the environment, but you also get the VMware licensing for an SDDC, which means you're going to get vSphere, you're going to get a vCenter, you're going to get vSphere Enterprise Plus, by the way, with all the features and functionalities. You'll get vSAN and you'll get NSX to help for security and helping to protect your environment with firewalls and be able to make your environment more secure. So it's like getting the best of the best with VMware licensing. It's all inclusive in the price. And with some of the new features and depending upon the licensing you currently have with VMware, there will be an option moving licenses from your existing environment up. But most people want to just eliminate some of those on-site licenses as they move forward. And all of your costs would be then moved from a CapEx to an OpEx expense. So that should answer that question. Hopefully everybody understands that. If you have any questions, reach out to your Insight sales rep. We'd be glad to sit down and talk to you and kind of walk you through the options you have.
Awesome. Well, I think the next question then will go to Tom. What other costs can impact my decision to move to the cloud?
Fantastic. Hopefully you guys can hear me. So there are a couple considerations that you need to think about as you move to cloud, including AVS. And that is where you place your virtual machines or your workloads. And that will have some impact as well as dependencies on that workload. To maybe things like egress charges that you may see or incur, or latency around whether those workloads can speak to one another. Those types of details are very critical. We actually have some tool sets, actually some of them from VMware, that help us identify some of that. For instance, if you're not familiar with Verni, it's a very common tool that we use to actually track and data pathing and those types of dependencies where virtual machines are talking to one another. But those are just a few of the aspects. There's lots of different things that could change costs and considerations to think about. We do have an offering we actually call WLA, that actually a workload alignment that helps identify that. But reach out to us if you have a question about those types of things, and that's what we're here for to help.
Well, the next question, let's go to Pat. What makes AVS different from native Azure?
One of the things that's different is that when you're in native, you have to accommodate for everything, your storage, your networking, your security, as well as the actual infrastructure. One thing that's kind of unique about the AVS, and for those people that have been using VMware for many years, it's all inclusive. So when you actually buy a node, you get all of that included automatically. You get your networking, you get your storage, you get your infrastructure. It really makes it easier to predict what size and how to grow your environment. You don't have to worry about adding additional storage as it grows. It's all built into the vSAN. As it starts to grow, it'll give you warnings if you start hitting the top end to be able to add an additional node. And then adding an additional node is usually about 15 to 20 minutes. So you can't do that in a real environment or a real data center today. You have to go out and procure the hardware, get it installed, bring it in, attach it. Usually a 30, 60-day event. Think of the cloud as something that if I need another server in a matter of 15 minutes, I can get another server. I can burst for business needs, and I can also lower it or turn them off when I'm not using them. So it gives you a lot of flexibility that you don't have in your existing data center. And native does offer some additional features that make it so there's additional costs associated with it because of the sizing requirements. It's a little bit easier to control. And again, most of your people have experience with VMware, and they know exactly how to manage the sizing of their environments.
All right. Next question for Tom. What are you seeing today with customers looking to move to the cloud? So specifically, what is their strategy going to the cloud?
Well, it depends upon the customer and what their use case is, what they're trying to achieve. So, for instance, if they're looking to use AVS as a DR location or even cloud as a DR location, that's a different type of strategy and different set of solutions that we bring to bear. As part of that, if the customer is looking for AVS specifically, there's a lot of different things that the customer is looking to potentially achieve with leveraging AVS. For instance, many times we find where a customer is in an existing data center, either through contract or bankruptcy or of that data center or whatever, they need to get out of that data center right away. And this is a perfect example of where AVS is that, hey, migrate to that new environment today. Let's get you out of that data center as quickly as possible. That might also happen, by the way, as part of a M&A, a migration or acquisition type of event, and where you need to get it's out of the environment you're in today, and you need to get into a new data center, and AVS becomes that new data center for you. By the way, one of the things we didn't mention that you can actually do, and I mentioned DR, is you can actually have multiple AVS environments in different regions. And there's some specific reasons you actually may want to do that. Specifically, for instance, let's say DR. So if you're moving your VMware environment into AVS today, and you're going to run production there, well, then you probably still have a need for DR. And then a second AVS site can actually be hosted as your DR location for that initial AVS production environment. Hopefully that answered the question.
It did. And I actually, before I pass it back to Pat, I want to ask you another question. So at
Sure.
Insight, we help a lot of customers. So how many customers has Insight actually helped move to the cloud?
Oh my gosh. I don't know the exact number. It's got to be in the many, many thousands, but I can kind of give you an idea around some of that. And I think there actually was a slide that kind of gave some details around Insight, if I remember right, the why Insight. But for instance, Insight is one of Microsoft's largest partners globally, if not the largest licensing partner for Microsoft globally. We are also one of the largest AVS delivery partners for globally for Microsoft. So we've done a ton of both not just AVS, but Azure cloud migrations, stand-ups, configurations, modernizations of those applications, security, all types of different engagements. And some of them might even be small. Like, for instance, a customer might already have an AVS environment, but they're looking to do something like, okay, I want to bring in a third-party firewall into that environment, and so they can, route some traffic and control that traffic flow within that's coming from AVS environment. And then we engage and just do that part. So that's where a customer's already in AVS.
And just to add on to that, currently, even with what I'm working on, I think I have 5 deals that are currently being worked on with the delivery team to actually migrate to AVS currently at this moment. So there's a lot of projects in the pipeline. There's a lot of projects that are being executed on currently. So it's an ongoing, and we've got a lot of experience with our Insight delivery team.
Well, perfect segue, because I want to ask, what's the normal timeline to migrate into AVS when a client works with Insight?
That's a great question, and there's a lot of what ifs in that answer. Depends upon the size of the environment. If they're moving a smaller environment or if they're moving in a large scale data center, it could typically, most of the smaller, maybe sub 100 VMs, we're usually looking at about a 3 to 4 week start to finish for actually migrating and getting the landing zone set up, getting the subscription in place, checking, making sure that we have everything connected with the HCX. We can do live migrations without changing IP, stretching layer 2. That can all be done fairly quickly, and that's one of the real perks of going to AVS is the speed of upgrade. If you did that from a modernization, you're probably talking the difference between 3 to 4 weeks to maybe six weeks to maybe 12 weeks. For the same kind of level of work to move into the cloud. So if you're in a hurry, or if you want to just try to get up there and do M&M, that's where we're seeing a lot of discussions lately about, they're up there, they're able to get their workloads up into the cloud quickly, then they can connect to the Azure services in the backside and do those migrations at leisure without having to worry about time frame. And it also reduces downtime for their applications as well.
Hey, Pat, I want to add one thing to a comment you made. And by the way, thanks for pointing out the stretch layer 2 IP, where you're keeping the IPs. That speeds things up a lot. But it made me think about something else, which is maybe not apparent to folks as I do the migration here. Think of AVS as, in my opinion, I like to think of it as you're standing up a brand new data center. And the reason I look at it that way is because you actually have to think about some additional things of, like, how are you going to handle authentication and access and cert management and traffic flow if you need a firewall, like I mentioned earlier. All those types of things that are foundational, rudimentary kind of data center services that you would normally build before you even put any workloads in those environments are very similar things that you want to consider and review and think about as part of going to AVS. Now, your answer to some of those questions might be to leverage many of the awesome Azure services, native Azure services that can be then brought into AVS and used alongside of that. But you might also be looking at things like, for instance, well, maybe I need to stand up or move an Active Directory server so that I can have some, Active Directory type of, access with inside that AVS environment for those virtual machines to log in and access. So anyhow, those are aspects we go through, and when we do a workshop, we talk about some of those things with you to identify, okay, what services do we need to make sure are there ready before we actually start to do the migration of the VMs themselves.
Well, talking about workshops, I think something that would be good for you to cover, Tom, would be Snap Start. So if you can give a quick overview of what that is.
Absolutely. So SnapStart is our own IP, so Insight's IP. It's a discovery tool, and I should say a discovery and analysis tool. It's 2 pieces, really. And it's a tool that we bring when we do an engagement with a customer. There's no additional charge for that. That's actually one of the reasons we developed the product, the solution, SnapStart itself, was because on a lot of these projects, especially in the past, we've had, by the way, we've had SnapStart for, I don't know, it's got to be 5 plus, maybe 8 years, something like that, and it's evolved and increased its capability over those years. But back when we started this development around SnapStart, there was some questions around why do we have to leverage a tool that we may have to purchase a license and pass that licensing cost off to the customer to do that initial discovery and get those licenses and as part of that product or delivery, and so we developed our own tool set that does many of the same things that those tools do. We just cover the cost of and included it as part of our delivery. In it, there's an additional thing reason that we, by the way, brought and built our own IP for SnapStart was because of getting that data many times and getting reports out of it. Was for other tools, it was a real challenge to get the reports that we wanted. There also were other times where a customer wanted to provided maybe some data set, let's say their CMDB, as well as alongside of our discovery tools, capabilities, and we can marry that data together. Other tools just did not allow us to do that, and many other things, including that data that comes out of SnapStart, is put into a database, and then other tools and IP that we have actually can ingest that and work with that data set so that we have tool sets that work in concurrent as part of our delivery to look and parse that data and perform analytics on it and other things.
Great. Well, thank you. Let's see. There's another question coming in from the audience, and this one will go to Pat. Who is responsible for updating or doing patches for this solution?
One of the things that many customers spend a lot of time is patching and doing upgrades inside their environment. When you move to AVS, that's all off your plate. Your team can spend more time doing projects and work with things that'll drive business value for your company. All patching, all upgrades are done by Microsoft. So it's a really simple, and it gives back a ton of time to the IT teams. No longer do they need to worry about doing patching and upgrading. That's all done by Microsoft on your behalf. No downtime. Basically, they'll take care of in the background, making sure that your appliances are all up and running. So it's a huge time saver for the IT operators and the IT teams, where they can now spend more time to help you find ways to drive more bottom line revenue for your company on projects that really bring value to you. So that's a huge time sink for most IT departments. And let me tell you, most of them are so glad to get rid of that. That is one thing that nobody wants to do. It's just time consuming, and it's always done in off hours. And you can actually have your weekends back for a change.
Hey, Pat, I just want to make one clarification on what you just said, which is true. The AVS parts that Microsoft provides you for, what you just said is absolutely true. I want to make sure that the audience also understands, though, that the OSs that are and applications that are inside your virtual machines / guests, that is on the customer to manage those. And if they have managed services or whatever, that of course those groups that manage those. But Microsoft and / Azure take care of vSAN, vSphere, and any other VMware products that NSX, for instance, that come as part of AVS, are updated and maintained by the Microsoft team.
Thanks for that clarification. Yes, you're right. Still have to do some work, folks. You still have to do something.
It's a shared responsibility.
Yes.
But let's focus on the positives. So let's go back to Pat. So I know in the presentation and even in some of the answers throughout this Q&A, you've covered this, but if you had to summarize, why would a client select AVS over native Azure?
I think that the majority, and there's a lot of good reasons to be able to pick AVS, but the one that really seems to really stick out is the skills that your team has. And if you've been managing a VMware environment, which almost every Fortune 500 company has, large VMware environments, Imagine having to relearn new skills, new tools. It's a challenge. And if you're familiar with running VMware, it is a no-brainer to be able to just take and extend your data center into the cloud using the same tools, the same skills, and be able to manage it exactly the same way you do for your on-premise environment. That alone is one reason, and probably the biggest reason why people will pick AVS, is it gives them the ability of having continuity with their management, with security, being able to build firewalls to protect it for isolation, to help try to reduce the hackers. It just really gives that clarity inside the environment without having to learn new tools. Not that new tools are bad, but most people would like to really kind of focus on growing their environment and growing their security. And if they've already learned those tools, it's always the best way to do it is be able to maintain. And you get state of the art. You don't get the old versions of VMware. You get the newest versions on some of the newest and fastest hardware imaginable. So it really is the best of both worlds. And that's usually the main draw for going to AVS.
Amazing answer. Amazing answer, Pat. I have another question for Tom. You did cover this in your presentation, but what are some other costs that can impact your decision, if you're a client, to move to the cloud?
Well, so for instance, one of the things that we did cover, but I just want to make sure everybody's really honed in on, is some of the savings that you can get around AVS, especially around getting security patching for end of support type products like Windows and SQL. And this can be a huge cost savings for some customers that are at a spot where they have older versions of Windows that are going end of support. And instead of buying a support contract to cover those and get patches for their on-prem environment, those virtual machines that are running those older Windows and SQL on-prem, it's a simple, easy migration, to move to AVS, and then you get those patches for free. And you would think, okay, well, that's going to save a little bit of money. But to be honest, I've actually been in some conversations with customers, and we calculated out for some customers it can be 7-figure type savings. And the other benefit is if you're not familiar with some of those support contracts, even if you don't buy it right away and you wait to buy it later, you still have to pay for it in where it started from, the program started from. So again, depending on where you're at in the journey, that cost and savings can even be compounded by going to AVS, because you're not paying for that back cost that you didn't take advantage of in that extended support project capacity program.
Well, I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to continue going through these questions. But Pat, is there anything so far that you'd like to share with the audience? Is there something that when somebody walks away from this webinar, you want them to know?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And from my perspective, I think we want to dispel the rumor that AVS is more expensive than Azure native. We've been able to prove it with a number of analysis with our customers. I want everyone to kind of walk away and think about different options when they looked at moving to the cloud. I think that there was a question brought up about it. If you have the same size VMs, and is it cheaper to move to AWS versus AVS native or AVS itself? It actually depends upon the environment, but more than likely is when you get about 100 VMs, it's actually cheaper usually to go to AVS. Depends upon the size, depends upon what the use cases are. Everyone is unique, and that's one thing that I think Insight brings to the table is we have a lot of great skill to be able to help you do that analysis. And we'll tell you honestly whether it makes more sense to go native or whether it makes more sense to go to AVS. So we really want to make sure we're doing the right thing for our customers. And I think that's one of the advantages of using Insight is that our skill set and all of the deliveries we've done, we now are able to really sit down and make those decisions jointly with you, listen to what your needs are, and making the best decision together.
Hey Pat, I'm gonna jump on that question a little bit further. So that's a great question, by the way, and I'll give you a very quick example of if you had that same 100 VMs, and let's say on-prem today, each one of those VMs you allocated 3 gigs of memory to it. And this is a hypothetical because I don't know what all the T-shirt sizes available within Azure IaaS are. But let's say if the next Azure IaaS virtual machine only allowed you to go either 2 gigs of memory or 4 gigs of memory. So if you migrated all those 100 virtual machines over to Azure IaaS, what would happen is all 100 of those virtual machines would be resized to consume 4 gigs of memory. And so you would be paying an additional, 400, gigs of memory that you may not even use or even originally allocated. But if you actually move those same 100 to AVS, they don't grow in size at all. Whatever you allocated on-prem and to those virtual machines, they are migrated identically into AVS that same way.
I know we only have 1 minute left, and you sort of answered this, Tom, but if there's something that the audience could walk away with after this webinar, from your perspective, what would it be?
Well, Pat hit on it actually a little bit earlier, and it's a lot of people think, well, geez, going to AVS, Microsoft's going to manage the environment for me. It's got to be more expensive. And we want to, make sure that everybody understands it may or may not be, but let's take a look at it. And in many cases, it actually, depending upon what the customer has for licensing, size of resource, VMs, T-shirt size, all the different aspects, when we start to take a look at that and then crunch the numbers, many times it actually comes out to be either close to the exact same cost, or it's cheaper, and you didn't have to change the technology, so you get to use the same skills you have today, and you didn't have to modernize today. You just moved to cloud and got the cloud into AVS right away. And so instead of modernizing those applications, which might take many months to do, you moved right away. So there's lots of additional benefits to looking at that, including cost. And some of those are associated costs you don't really think about, like reskilling people. But yeah, reach out to us and we'd be happy to go through and do a workshop with you and look at those numbers and give you a comparison and see where it makes sense for you.
Perfect. Well, Tom, Pat, I just want to thank you for leading this webcast, answering all the questions, and sharing all your knowledge with the rest of us. And for the audience, thank you for joining us.